And what's going on, Los Angeles, LAFB fam, Bruin Nation? The Thriller and Madman are finally back together stateside. And as we promised, getting the band back together here. My goodness, Thriller, it's so great to see you, my friend. But I have to say, what a wild month it's been since we've been on vacation. You know, we were talking offline where it's like, man, we really picked the right month to go on vacation. You were in Italy. I was in Scotland and in England. And so, for the last several weeks, we sort of our travels didn't cross over. So the whole month of June, either you or me or both of us were on vacation. And, you think, Thriller, hey, maybe a couple of recruits, we'll sort of hit it when we get back. We'll catch up, all of this stuff. My goodness, probably the most active month of recruiting UCLA has had in over a decade, and you could potentially argue over the last 25 years. I mean, absolute madness here, Will. That has taken place. But before we kind of jump into all those stats and that overview, brother, how are you? How's life? So great to see you, my friend, as always, and so excited to be doing this.
Man, it is so good to be back. I nearly had an aneurysm that we couldn't talk for like a month because the commitments would not stop, Madman. It was like an endless supply of commits. I was at my wedding in Italy. I'm wearing the Italian soccer jersey. I got a little Inter Milan action right here. Micah Smith commits, and that was really kind of the start of everything going crazy over there. He's gotten teammates. He's gotten fellow Floridians committing. We got people from all over the country committing to UCLA. And the last time we run a pod, I posed the question to you, is UCLA officially cool again amongst the college football world? And after that month of June, where 14 new commitments come into UCLA, unequivocally, you can say, yes, UCLA football is cool again amongst recruits, amongst fans. One of the top transfer portal classes as well. We're in the top 25. Life is good. I don't know when to take vacations anymore in college football. June seemed like a safe month. It definitely was during the Chip Kelly recruiting years. Not the case. Not so fast, my friend, as Lee Corso would say. June might be off the table. It might be July from here on out for you and I when we're talking about UCLA.
Thriller, indeed. I mean, not so fast for sure. This new wild world of college football, 24/7, free agency never stops. Absolutely. I think you and I have to sort of think about what makes the most sense here. Maybe it might even be like March, or something. We might have to just sort of eliminate summer altogether.
It's crazy.
Absolutely wild. Absolutely wild. But Will, I think what you said, the evidence is a resounding yes over this last 30 days, because what I think has been so exciting over this period is you talk about the geographic diversity of the players. You talk about not only really establishing a footprint in California, but also simultaneously going all the way cross country to the likes of Florida, to the likes of all corners of the country to be able to pull in recruits. And I think the one thing that has been so exciting to hear is each of these recruits time and again have said, we're very excited about what DeShaun Foster is building at UCLA. We love the culture. We love the staff. We want to be on the ground floor of something special. And also, so many of them have talked about how personal the recruiting process has been for them. And so between that vision of the future, coming in on the ground floor to build something great, and then it being personal, Will, I think we're just really excited with where this is going. DeShaun, hey, he said it to us. He said it to us last spring. Guys, I can do this job. I know what to do. I know how to recruit. I know how to speak to players. I know how to bring it in. I know what it was like in the 80s and 90s when UCLA was really a thriving football program and a national brand that everybody wanted to go to. And I know the blueprint of how to recreate that. So, Will, let's kind of get into it a little bit in terms of from a macro perspective. First of all, it's great to be back in my own home. It's great to see you back in your own home. Will, it was such an emergency situation where I was in a hotel gym rattling off all of these recruits. There was a light shining on my eye. I felt like I was in an interrogation room. I had to go take a shower after going through these pods because it was so bright over there. So excited to be in the friendly confines of the Decker and Madden and talking about all this. But Will, at a macro level, let's sort of recap here. Started the month sitting at 8 recruits. We got all the way to 22 recruits. We had 2 guys decommit, and then we had a recent addition, Torrey Davis. We'll talk about him in a second. So we're sitting on now 21 commits here, Will. And if you add it up, that flurry and now with Torrey, 15 of the 21 commits in the month of June, Will. I mean, absolute madness here. And given that quantity of player as well as the quality, the average rating of the player, UCLA at one point in the month of June was sitting as high as 9th in recruiting nationally with the likes of On3 and 247, 9th and 10th. That's fallen a bit to around 17th, 18th, 19th. But I think it's safe to say here, Will, that the ground has been paved to a situation where they can firmly establish a top 20 class. And if you can get a top 20 class, and start building, and you put together a winning product on the field, a top 20 class with a bowl game, and then setting that up for next season in terms of recruiting, you're starting to build the pipeline to be very, very significant. So, Will, at a macro level, your thoughts, 15 commits, who are you really most excited about, and what's really caught your eye with this group sort of holistically?
Yeah, man, I think there's no way around it. We've always had in mind with this podcast, we're entering our 5th season doing UCLA football together. UCLA had to awaken the sleeping giant that it was when it came to football. And I think this has a chance to be a culture-defining class for UCLA moving forward, given what they've got in the stable this year on the field, given what they have in the recruiting room. You mentioned 15 new commits. That's not by accident. And Foster gets a ton of credit for this in terms of how he's kind of laid out his game plan of how to attack the country. We've got commitments from Hawaii. We've got commitments in Florida now. We got commitments in Tennessee. Colorado, I think we got 2 of the top 3 commits in the state when it comes to what they have to offer out there in the Rocky Mountains. But the guys I got to give credit to, it is Andy Kwan and it is Tino Sinceri.
Yes.
And I think these guys played more of a role than you guys would think in recruiting than anyone else. And I'm going to take a direct quote from Micah Smith, the guy who kind of started this off. For those that are unfamiliar with Micah, I'm sure you are at this point, one of the top tackles in the state of Florida. This guy was between us and the defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. This is the quote he had. Watching one-on-ones and watching Coach Kwan interact with the players, that was the main reason of me coming up here. Andy Kwan, coach, he was a general assistant at Alabama with Nick Saban. He knows how to recruit. He was at Central Arkansas before this. Santana Carlos talking about Tino Sinceri. Really gifted. He said, Tino Sinceri is comparing me to Jerry Jeudy, which absolutely flattered me, a guy he worked with at Alabama at the time. And then Cooper Jaworski had the line of all lines. He goes, I would run through a brick wall for him, talking about Andy Kwan. And you know what this reminds me of? I think when you think of these incredible titans in tech, and you talk about your Steve Jobs or your Bill Gates, it's not necessarily just them. They may have had the vision for it, like a DeShaun Foster had, but it's the people next to him. It's the Wozniak next to a Steve Jobs. It's the Paul Allen, the Steve Ballmer next to a Bill Gates. Tino Sinceri and Andy Kwan are kind of building that out and getting UCLA back in the frame of things, and to kind of just help UCLA get out of this slump they've had in recruiting. They have not been even close to the top 20 since before the pandemic in 2018, if you look at rivals. And, it reminds me of that scene in Wolf of Wall Street where Jordan Belfort comes in. He just left Wall Street. He's going to this penny stocks place.
Yep.
And they're going in there, and he finds out from Spike Jones. He's like, you mean I can get 50% commission on these stocks? And he goes in there and he starts selling, and the whole place stops. And they're like, how is this guy doing that? And I think that was the whole staff kind of looking at, Andy Kwan and Tino Sinceri, guys that were trained at the Wall Street, if you will, at Alabama. I mean, what is a better place of recruiting than Alabama? And just seeing them go into Florida and you're like, you just got one of the top tackles in Florida to commit to us at UCLA. Are you kidding me? So I think when you saw that, you got Jones Jr. coming in after. You got Santana Carlos, the slot guy I'm a really big fan of. And Tino was actually recruiting that guy at Indiana, had the Indiana
Right.
offer, decided to go elsewhere. Charles Schwartzel, the Washington defensive tackle, I'm a huge fan of this guy. He was at offers from Michigan, these type of dudes. To kind of summarize all those points, man, it's a culture-defining class. You bring in guys that trained at the Stanford and the Harvard of college football under the Nick Saban tutelage at Alabama, and the results are showing with these recruiting wins that they have. I mean, this is it. UCLA, in my opinion, has a real chance, probably the closest they've been to being back since the Brett Hundley years. And it's a breath of fresh air for UCLA fans, Madman.
No, Thriller, so well said. And, it's just so intoxicating what they're doing and the passion that both you and I have for what's going on over here. And I think you said it best, Will, when it comes to Andy Kwan and Tino Sunseri. I love the analogy there to, the Ballmer to the Gates and the Wozniak to the Jobs, because you need to have the visionary, but then you need to be able to have the operators. And I think what DeShaun gets so much credit for right now is the vision and the foresight to be able to hire these guys and to be able to be in a position to succeed. Hiring Tino Sunseri and allowing Andy Kwan to have a bigger role within this organization and really unlock his talents. And then to Andy Kwan and Sunseri's credit, their ability to relate to the modern player and their ability to interact with them and their ability to show the game plan. I think that's something, Thriller, that is being not talked about enough across the landscape of college football. Today's day and age now, with the transfer portal, with NIL, with all of these elements now that are different, you have to talk to players differently. You have to relate to players differently. You have to build trust with players differently. You have to really sort of create those bonds and that belief system differently. What worked certainly in the 80s and 90s and even in the 2000s and the 2010s won't work nowadays, because the power dynamic has shifted so significantly in this sport in favor of the player over the coach that you have to sort of approach things differently. You need guys that are younger. You need guys that really understand the world and what it means to be a young person in the world today. You need guys that understand technology and social media. You just need guys that are relatable and good individuals. And also on top of that, obviously, be excellent positional coaches that understand the schematics. And Tino Sunseri and Andy Kwan check both of those boxes in a very significant way, Will. Culture defining indeed. And I think when we go back and we think about those Hundley years, and obviously Neuheisel got Hundley, but then who are the players we think of after Hundley that made that kind of culture defining classes of 2012, 2013, 2014? Hendricks, Jack, Barr. Those are those anchors that you think about that then become those super nodes that bring everybody else. And to me, Will, I think you nailed it. The two guys that to me are most significant in this overall group right now, it is Micah Smith and it is Johnny Jones. And I think the reason for that is you're talking about two elite offensive line prospects from the state of Florida. And I think what the significance there is, Will, number one, you said it. We plucked them from the deep south of Florida. You're
SEC
talking about
country, national
across the country, Will, across the country. And you said it best. Look at the offers these guys had collectively. Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Miami, Penn State. I mean, it's a who's who of programs of success the last 10 or 15 years. And for them to leave those established programs to come to UCLA, my God, how huge is that? And you're talking about a situation, and what I love is it's offensive linemen. And look, you and I both know this better than anyone. The Big Ten in particular is built from the inside out. It's built from the trenches outside. So you're bringing those anchor players on the offensive line from all the way across the country when they had the absolute buffet of choices in college football to pick UCLA. I think that inspired so many other players to join, and I think will continue to do so. So I really love Jones and Micah Smith in particular as kind of the anchors of this class and this domino effect. Your thoughts, Will?
Yes. I mean, we talked about it. Big Ten is a trench play conference.
Totally.
And if you were to ask me my two favorite position groups when it comes to this class, it's the offensive and defensive line. They're mapping this out exactly how we talked about it to win in Big Ten football It's dominated by the big uglies up front and the men trying to get the quarterback at all costs. And you look at the defensive line, man. Anthony Jones, 6'4.5", 285. This kid is 17 years old.
Absolutely.
Had a litany of great offers as well. We mentioned, David Schwirzel. This guy is a basketball player at 260, 6'3". He's got versatility on the edge, 3 technique, or just straight up tackle. And then Yaya God, I mean, the offers.
Yeah.
Georgia, Texas, these type of dudes. Talk about, just a very strong recruiting class on that defensive front. I love what I'm seeing from it. And the best part is, if we go out there and overachieve expectations as we expect to, I think at this point I'm expecting 7 to 8 regular season wins, maybe a bowl win. If you keep that upward trajectory, if you touch that 8-9 win mark with this recruiting class, maybe you get Brian Bonner, the running back that's local, that's a 4-star kid here. Maybe, at this point, you're a national recruiting team. There's no other way to say it. If we're going from Florida to Hawaii, maybe you sway some other big names and then this big fish in the pond that we can go get. It's unbelievable what UCLA is doing. And, to say I came out with comparisons to Apple and Microsoft. They were very big. And I'm not saying UCLA football is there just yet, but everything starts from the ground up.
Absolutely.
And the momentum with this program is a real thing right now. And I think this can surge into something special if the talent continues to be developed the way that we've seen it with the likes of, Carson Schwessinger being the first pick of the second round, with Liatu Latu being the first defensive player. Development has been the key point that they're selling here. And it's appealing to these kids, and it's making waves.
It's making waves indeed, Will. And, I think we're going to look at this June period as, you talked about the growth of Apple and Microsoft. Well, they all started in the garages at some point. This was sort of the garage moment. We could look back 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now and say, that June of 2025 was the garage moment of this program really bringing and growing, to sort of soaring to new heights. And then I think, Will, just to sort of close it up on this, on these commits here in June, we talked about offensive line, defensive line. That's how you win. But then what I'm also really excited about, you mentioned kind of Santana Carlos. You mentioned some of these skill players offensively. And look, California has a ton of them. And so, but what I love is, you're picking guys that fit this system so perfectly. You talked about Carlos being the slot guy. Xavier Warren, Will, to me, is someone that I'm salivating over. 6 feet, 165 pounds, lightning, track star. When you look at someone like the Georgetown, Texas, you're pulling from the meccas of college football, no pun intended there, from across the country in a very, very significant way. And when you look at a guy like Xavier Warren, when you think about those lightning quick, twitchy guys, what are the programs you think you really utilize those guys the best? It's that wide open Big 12 style, Will. And, he had offers from Oklahoma State. He had offers from Houston. He had offers from SMU. So when you're starting to look at the type of player and then the type of team that's going after that player, and you're seeing how aligned it is to their philosophies and the player skill sets, and the fact that UCLA is able to beat these programs that have either been historically great over the last 10, 15, 20 years, or teams that literally made the college football playoff last year, and you're able to bring them in. I think that's what there's something about the message and the vision that is sticking with all of these guys. And my goodness, how excited we are about this. And Will, just to sort of close out recruiting in a significant way, one more, number 15. We talked about 14 of them, but Torrey Davis, number 3 overall recruit from the state of Colorado, top 20 athlete overall, very exciting here, Will. He's probably going to come in and really, again, sort of really establish that secondary room. He was committed to Colorado from Boulder, Boulder View High School, plucking him from Coach Prime. He had other offers, Kansas State, Utah, others. But to be able to sort of pluck a top 3 player from the state of Colorado who was already committed to Boulder and bringing him in as a significant athlete, both in the secondary as well as potentially, again, another option maybe in that return game on special teams, really, really significant there. Will, your thoughts on Torrey Davis?
I think it was a great commit because he's not even a full-time football player, very similar to Schwerzel. He is a basketball player that goes into football season, kind of like what John Vaughns, who's going to be representing UCLA at Big Ten Media Day, was doing on the baseball diamond, then going over to UCLA. And you made a really good point. I think Colorado as a program right now is as attractive as it's been in a long time, probably over 20, 25 years. We're talking about with Coach Prime coming there, where he's legit 4- and 5-star kids coming to campus each and every week for games to kind of see what that, environment is like. And the fact that we've plucked not one, but 2 players out of Colorado, Camden Jensen being, one of the top tight ends that state has produced in a long time. And then Torrey Davis, I mean, we're talking about a guy who's 6'1", 190. Yeah. He's got size where he could translate immediately at the safety position, and he's going to be putting on some bulk when he gets to UCLA as well. I like it a lot. And what I would say to this, I think a lot of people get caught up in the stars of things, stars of recruits, and what that is. Campaigning for 4- and 5-star statuses is a political thing, in my opinion. You got to show up to the camps. You got to shake hands. You got to produce. A lot of these kids can't afford to go to camps, or they'll have situations where it just doesn't make sense for them to travel, on a family budget and things like that. Let me show you just exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to this. Cooper Jaworski, who's a guy that I'm really excited about coming to UCLA. And I'm just going to share my screen real quick.
Please.
So you guys can see it. Cooper Jaworski, this is a month ago. He was at the Under Armour Next. This is probably the first big camp he's gone to. One of the top 5 performers at the camp wasn't even a star, had a star to his name at this point. Cooper Jaworski, the 6'3", 290-pound offensive lineman. Balls out in this camp, gets an Auburn offer, gets UCLA, chooses UCLA. If he kept going through the camp route, this would be something you'd want. I mean, everyone wants a guy that can perform against the top. Right. He outperformed 2 edges, or an edge and a running back from SC, according to this particular bystander there. And then you scroll up to Madman and Thriller, and I know you talked about this on your show. He was at the Polynesian Bowl. Polynesian Bowl is very, very big deal. And he did it, not necessarily as a senior. To reference people on who the Polynesian Bowl MVPs were, 2022, Travis Hunter was the MVP of that game.
Who's that, by the way, Will? Some guy named Travis Hunter? Yeah.
Probably one of the most, revolutionary recruits college football has seen over the last, quarter century. And then you got, Nico Iamaleava, who won the MVP in 2023, UCLA's quarterback. Look at what he did in this practice. There were several who was that moments for the 3-star cornerback prospect over the 4 days of practice, and he kept that productivity going into Friday's game with 5 tackles to finish. I know you referenced the point where he's one of the hardest hitting safeties they've seen at that point. All I'm saying is UCLA has had a very good knack of identifying the high ceiling 3-star guys, offering them Yaya God fitting into that camp, a couple other big names. I was high on, Santana Carlos. You mentioned Xavier Warren. I mean, is he in the F1 movie with Brad Pitt racing around the track right now? He's got a 10.32 100-meter time. I mean, are you kidding me? So, all these guys have high upside traits, and I'm excited to see these guys get in a program that has proven time and time again development is what they can bring to the table. So they got high
it's such a great point that you just made that I wish was talked about more nationally as well, in terms of the stars is a direct function of visibility. And to your point, so much of that visibility is dependent on things outside of performing on the football field. You have to be able to have the budget to be able to go to all of these events and these camps and these high visibility interactions. You have to be able to sort of put your name out there and get the right, agents at this stage and the right sort of funnels and the right organizations. And sometimes that's not available to players given family circumstances, just given the state or the region that they're in, given the school that they're a part of. And so it's so interesting. Think about that. You've got a player that is no stars, and within a week, is up to 4 stars. How does that happen? What did you, eat or drink, over that week? It's the same player who just had an opportunity. They had the access to be able to show what they could do. And I think that's what's so critical about this. At the same time, we get so obsessed in this star culture. Even if you do have the visibility, what is the difference between a high 3-star and a low 4-star? It's always fascinating to me how sites like On3, 247 Sports, and no knock on them, they're fantastic, and we all go and we reference them, and they're doing a fantastic job. But I always wonder, Will, how you can always rate a recruiting class to the second decibel point. As like a mathematician, to me, it's sort of kind of wild. Like, this class is 87.19. Like, how are you generating a second decimal point on qualitative things? So the combination of the visibility coupled with the combination of the blurry lines between, what's a 3 and what's a 4, I think kind of dwarfs sometimes the perception of what you need to be focused on. UCLA has gotten some great kids here. And, you made a business reference, Will, to Apple and Microsoft earlier. You want to find the kids that have not yet been discovered, right? Like, just like any business, you want to be able to attract customers. You want to be able to go to markets that haven't been discovered yet, because that's where the potential is. You don't want to be the 17th company that's in the same market. Just in many ways, you don't want to be the 17th or 18th program that's chasing after the same kids. So by design, if these kids are a little bit lower in terms of the stars, but you see the potential, those are the guys that you need to be going after. And that's why you and I think, are so excited about this class, because we're not looking at the numbers, because we understand how the numbers are generated and the flaws with those numbers. Your thoughts there, Will?
Yeah. And, for every 5-star kid, you probably remember this as well. I thought Soso Jamabo was going to be Adrian Peterson when he went to campus.
Right.
I thought Mike Juarez was going to be the next Eric Kendricks, Anthony Parr type of guy. For every 5-star, you could point to about 2 or 3 that didn't really work out as a whole. And you look at some of the development we've had here, whether Greg Dulcich and Carson walk-ons that became NFL stalwarts, high draft picks in those positions. You do have your Latus, you are freaks of natures, but we were able to produce, with different guys like a Kaz Allen. These type of dudes made NFL rosters being 3-star guys. And you know what I'd say to that? If it's a 3-star guy and Kirby Smart, Sarkisian, Michigan's coaching staff wants in on that guy, I'm taking their advice, because they know a whole lot more about football than the average guy on a couch talking about 3-star status.
So no doubt, Will. No doubt. Yeah. That's actually where the stars should actually be generated from in so many ways, right? Not like, these sort of random actions, in terms of like 40 time or these sort of random activities or sort of your judgment. In many ways, you should be assessing a player by who else wants him, right? That's actually the way to sort of assess.
It's like, am I listening to science advice from Twitter X user 27 or Neil deGrasse Tyson?
There you go.
Who am I listening to on this? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. No, totally spot on there, Will. But again, I think we're just very excited about where this is going. And look, fingers crossed. Now that we're back in town, Will, let's hope that July is even more crazy than June, So let's keep it rolling there. Will, I want to close with this, really fun, robust conversation. Big Ten Media Day coming up in the middle of July. Super excited. You and I are both going to be there. We're going to have all coverage, interviews, conversations. I think it's going to be great. We'll have a pod before, a pod after, a pods during. And it's going to be a really special time.
You and I and a gambling heater in there.
You and I and a gambling heater. Remember the last time we were in Vegas and just running amok. So it's going to be more fun like that.
And remember, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Stays in Vegas. That's why I didn't specify, Will. I didn't specify. So but we're going to have a ball there. But you talk about the 3 guys that are representing UCLA on Big Ten Media Day on July 24th. Our new quarterback, the face of the franchise, if you will, Nico Iamaleava is going to be super exciting. And then you got Garrett DiGiorgio, and then you got John Vaughns. I find it to be a very interesting trio. I think Iamaleava makes a ton of sense, which is interesting because I think in past years, in a sort of a Chip Kelly regime, he wouldn't want his most decorated players to be at Media Day, for the circus and the hoopla. I think Iamaleava is going to draw a ton of attention and interest, just given the story and everything that happened to be at UCLA. I think he's going to be sort of box office, if you will, at Media Day over these, time that UCLA is going to be there. And then I thought it was interesting with DiGiorgio and John Vaughns, offense, defense, but it also felt like a lot of senior-laden veteran leadership to be there. Kind of the voice of the team, the souls of the team in many ways, guys that have been in the program for a number of years, seen the transitions, can, I think, speak to kind of the change that's taking place at UCLA, and guys that I think are expected to take outsized leadership roles in the locker room. And so, you've got your kind of shiny new toy in Iamaleava, and I think some veteran stalwarts in DiGiorgio and John Vaughns. Will, your thoughts on just kind of the three guys that UCLA is representing in Media Day, and anything that you're looking for in particular during Media Day? This is a few of them that we've done now, so excited to be doing this again.
Yeah, always one of the best weeks of the year. We did Indianapolis last year. Ryan and I went. You were sorely missed last year. It was a blast. We did Vegas. We did LA before that. Remember, we sat, out of all people, they chose you and I to sit with Lincoln Riley
and Caleb. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, which was pretty insane. I'm sitting next to Lincoln Riley as a guy that covers UCLA. And you know how I feel about the Bruins now after covering them. That was kind of a surreal moment, but always one of the best years, weekends of the year when it comes to college football. You get a grip on the conference. You get to kind of, rub shoulders with the who's who in college football, even more so than the Pac-12 media days, because you got the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Oregons. Oregon's was always there, but, Penn State's coming through. It's just, it feels bigger. It feels brighter. It feels like you're just in a different place when it comes to college football. And what I think about it is, if, like you said, man, Nico would have been nowhere near that stage had Chip Kelly been the head coach and decision maker at this point in time. The fact he's going to be there is going to draw a lot of attention to UCLA, which I think is only a good thing for where this program wants to get to in terms of selling season tickets. We got to pack the Rose Bowl this year, making future waves for this team in the future. The guy I'm most excited for, though, is John Vaughns. I mean,
yeah.
I was talking to Wayne Cook because, Madman, you have to know you're my first choice when it always comes to talking about UCLA. You are in Scotland at this point. I'm like, I have to talk UCLA. And I love talking to Wayne, too. Wayne is one of the best guys around.
No doubt.
So I call up Wayne, and Wayne had a bunch of tidbits from the spring that he was like, itching to get off his chest. You just want to talk football, which I love. And he's like, I talked to John, and, I don't think I'm speaking out of school here. He was like, John came up and told him, he's like, this is my first spring playing football, because he was always on the baseball diamond.
Yep, exactly.
And he's that fast twitch athlete. You and I had talked about at length where it's like, this guy could be a hybrid safety. He could be a linebacker. His brother, famous USC wide receiver, Tyler Vaughns, clearly athleticism in that family. Maybe he's the leader of the defense. To me, that's what him going to, media day signifies, is John Vaughns might be the guy calling the plays next to Chisholm, getting this unit ready and replacing big shoes and Carson Schwessinger in doing so. So John Vaughns, I mean, that was the big one for me, where I'm like, hell yeah, this guy's been here for a long time. He deserves it. We're excited to have him out there. DiGiorgio, just a stalwart of the offensive line group. Really excited to have him here. And I think he's going to be a really key cog in this offensive line, really changing. I think that Andy Kwan and, Coach Foster, putting on him kind of the leader of the offensive line, if you will. I think it's a big title for him, especially in a team that I think has a real chance of winning 8-9 games, as I stated earlier.
No, Will, I think a really great point. And me too. I'm just so excited about John. A fully committed, kind of locked in, engaged, immersed John Vaughns, I think could do volumes for UCLA season. We're so focused on the guys we're losing. We've talked at length about the fearsome foursome, what they have meant to this team and this program in terms of truly laying the foundation. John Vaughns is going to have to sort of step in there and be that leader. And you and I have always sort of talked about this, Will. Always felt that the best version of John Vaughns is Derwin James. If he just sort of puts it all together, that hybrid linebacker safety type of option. And you mentioned kind of needing to captain that defense in terms of being able to read coverages, put guys in the right spots, and really kind of setting up the defense for success play over play. We saw Schwessinger kind of take more of that role last year. But the guy who was really the unsung hero, Will, in so many ways in years past, was Stephen Blaylock doing that. And so, John Vaughns being able to potentially take on that Blaylock type of role, particularly on the back end, and particularly in those areas where I think the chess game happens a little bit more in the Big Ten in the secondary, because so many teams are run heavy. You're going to have to sort of stack the box. And so what you do with that secondary in terms of choices that you make, in terms of diving down or playing various coverages or shading certain types of the field, I think that's where really the knowledge of the game comes in a significant way. And John's always demonstrated that. And now if he can kind of take maybe some of that baseball IQ of being able to kind of read defenses, play the outfield, and do all of those things, bring it over to the football field along with a full spring of conditioning, weight room, familiarity with the playbook, camaraderie with the team, building that team chemistry. I think the sky is the limit there for John to have an absolute breakout season. And we, in many ways, could be talking about John Vaughns this time next spring, come NFL draft time, the way we've been talking about the aforementioned players that you talked about, like Schlesinger and Latu, in years past. So really excited to be there, Will, and it's going to be so fun. But my God, Thriller, we finally got back together after it felt like a year. Really excited for our next one, hopefully in the next couple of days as soon as something drops. And my goodness, the trajectory is so high for this team. And let's not forget now, Will, here we are, early July. First game is August 28th. We are inside of 60 days for the season to begin. So I think you and I, obviously we've got a keen eye on recruiting, but I think a lot of our episodes now in the days to come are going to start being focused on previewing what we're going to be seeing in this 2026 season: offense, defense, players, schedule, record, projections, all of those things now that we've seen things formulate. So much fun content to come. So excited about it. Thriller, you're my brother from another mother. We both just bleed UCLA. Can't wait for more and more episodes here as we get into the season. Bruin Nation, thank you so much, as always, for all the love, all the support. We love you guys. Hit that like and subscribe button as we continue to sort of grow the presence. And as always, 4's up forever.